There certainly is an interest in that kind of podcasting, and I'm not surprised. And in fact, to be honest, I always think that in fact our young men have been quite restrained, given I think the stuff that's come against them.
How do you counter someone who is a racist, a misogynist, and an anti-Semite? You could expose them, hold them up to mainstream criticism and ridicule, prove in open debate their ideas are ludicrous. But what if they revel in those labels? And when you point out their hateful nature, they and their fans embrace it. Well, one such figure is Nick Fuentes, who's increasingly the face of the American far right. The Conservative peer, Tony Sewell, has written for The Times about the challenge Fuentes poses to the liberal order and why he appeals to so many young men, including here in the UK. And Lord Sewell joins me now. What do you think, Lord Sewell, makes a racist, misogynist, anti-Semite so appealing to so many people?
You know what? I don't even think I think we're almost asking the wrong question here, because we can always go into this debate and say, oh, it's like the Andrew Tate thing. Here are just a group of young men who just are terrible and we should condemn them. But I actually think it's much more profound than that. I think what's going on here is the conditions that have brought this about. And for me, I think that I think in Britain, we've just decided that we're not going to go there when it comes to the conditions of particularly white boys. And for years, we've decided to ignore their plight. And almost they've ignored their own plight, really, in a sense, because in education, in employment, mental health, all of those parameters, they're scoring the worst. And yet at the same time, if they complain, if they suggest that the world is against them, then they're the ones who are condemned as far right and racist. And I think so we've got this sort of strange sort of dilemma where we kind of have a group that's finding, in a sense, people like Nick Fuentes attractive, but at the same time, when they did, and then anybody stood up for them, they were immediately kind of labelled racist, particularly racist and fascist. I think that was the thing, and I found that particularly when I did my own report on racial disparities, and found that in fact it was that white group that was performing the worst. And yet there was a massive pile-on from just very reasonable people who thought that you shouldn't say that you almost couldn't breach that kind of taboo that white boys were actually coming up the worst in terms of all our metrics. And it was kind of that. Now you imagine if you're a white boy in Hartlepool and in fact a group of ethnic minority scholars and commentators find that in fact your group is performing the worst, and then the whole media come against you for that. How would you feel? And I think that's so to me, I think that we've got a lot to answer for, and in fact the chickens or the whatever is coming home to roost, as they say. And I think that's what we've got at the moment. They will go to a place where and people will take advantage when there is this space that we've created. And I think that that's the dilemma that we face at the moment.
Now, Nick Fuentes has already got considerable traction and a sizable following in America. Have you seen support for him growing here in the UK?
Not really, but what I have seen is a sort of sense that I don't know what the traction, what the numbers are, but there certainly is an interest in that kind of podcasting, and I'm not surprised. And in fact, to be honest, I always think that in fact our young men have been quite restrained, given I think the stuff that's come against them. And I say young men, I say specifically white young men, and I say restrained in the sense that everything, I think, media-wise. I mean, I would never. I have a PhD and whatever. I've taught at universities. There is no way on this planet that I would advise many young men to go to any of our top universities to study.
Why?
Terrible. It would be a terrible place to go for them. But what would you, what first of all, you're going to go in there. What's the numbers here? We're talking about you're probably about 15% of the population, if that. Certainly hardly any of, and certainly if you're from a poor background, you're going to be, there's going to be hardly any of you there. Secondly, I think that the kind of curriculum, I mean, my own subject, English, in history, you'll be taught totally to feel ashamed of your background. You'll be told that you're white privilege. You're told that your ancestors, in fact, enslaved my ancestors, so you're responsible for that. You've got a student union that will be totally against you because you're white. I mean, the whole space would be terrible. Probably better off trying to get a plumbing job or something like that. But don't forget those universities. And I think that it would be, in some ways, we've just allowed this beast to kind of grow and actually just been totally indifferent to it. And I think that, those universities, those courses, and I've looked at them, lots of them, have no positive thing to say about working class white men in this country.
I mean, we've seen the effect that Andrew Tate has on so many boys and young men. It's well documented. Why do you think characters like him and Nick Fuentes are so appealing to so many young men? What is it about them that is the particular draw you think that you found in your research and your report?
Yeah, I mean, school. I mean, I can't think now of every area from watching television to school to going to university. Every area, I think, every aspect of life. If you're a white male walking around, and it wasn't always like this. And we're not talking about something to do with just. I mean, they're not even. If you look at it. They're not even a protective characteristic. And if you look at the numbers that are around them, every other group is getting protected here, except them. They're considered the dangerous group. So to me, it's obvious, and they're not. That's the reality. They only become danger because, in a sense, there's nowhere else for them to go. So if you're creating a society, you're creating a world where you've alienated this group. And it's not so surprising. It's not even Andrew Tate. It's actually even more so. I think it's just a sense of sitting at home and feeling really isolated.
But Tony, can I just jump in here? I mean, isn't one of the reasons why young white men don't have any of those things as a protected characteristic because they simply don't need it? They've not been bottom of the pile. History will tell you that a certain platform of privilege is available to you simply because you are a young white man.
Listen, I in the column, if you're right, I made an analogy. I linked this to Dickens and I linked this to the 19th century poor white boys that were in the 19th century. Look, we're talking about poor white, low-income boys. And that's essentially we're talking about. They have no privilege. Their perception they might have. You tell me what privilege some poor white boy in Hartlepool who goes to a rundown, comprehensive, no work, nothing going.
Sure, but I think the troubling thing, Tony, though. No, I completely accept that. But I think the problem that an awful lot of people have with those who follow Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes is they are not in that category. They are not poor white boys who are suffering from a bad education, will leave school with no job prospects simply because of where they were born. The level of support for Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate is quite often in a much, much higher socioeconomic part of our community. Men who really
why are you concerned about those two? What you should be concerned about are the reasons behind it. So you go, these are really going to be the symptoms.
Because I want some young men to just take responsibility for themselves, Tony. I sometimes struggle with the notion that they don't have choice, because they do have a choice. They're just making a choice that is really bad.
It's quite interesting you say that. I think they do. I absolutely agree that the whole notion of responsibility should be there. And I'm definitely one for agency. I've spoken to that about the situation, particularly for black boys as well. There's a lot of choices, a lot of things going. However, I think that there comes a point where, in fact, when you see the narrative stacked up against them, nobody's really, they're not really going out moaning at all, you know. I mean, I'm one moaning for them. No, I don't. They're not going on the street saying, "Oh, woe is me." They're actually just in their bedrooms playing games. So they're not really a problem. They're not really saying, "Oh, you know, the world is against me." So, you know, in fact, they need more people to say that. You know, it's the opposite.
Tony, can I ask? There's a lot of debate around whether or not the likes of Fuentes and Andrew Tate should be given platform, or no one should interview them, no one should hear them speak. In this world of free speech, there's a debate around every time we hear from someone like him. Piers Morgan has just had him on his show. Are people either drawn more towards what he's saying or turned off from his rhetoric? What are your thoughts on that?
I think these things will increase, but I think they'll increase more if we don't address the issues that those boys are presenting to us. They need a new narrative. They need a positive narrative about themselves. They need an education system that is really going to link towards their needs. They also need for us to begin to kind of understand that they are not closet racist, fascist, right wing if they complain that there are things that are against them in their communities. They have the legitimate questions about mass immigration. They have the legitimate issues about grooming gangs. They have legitimate issues to express about being boys in perhaps a feminized school context. All these things are legitimate, and we can't just shut them down. If you shut them down, then these other people will come out, and they will come out, and they will be the voices, and they will be the followers. So I think our society have just got to come to terms now with this reality and start saying, well, look, there is, you know, this is a group that we've got to take serious, and yes, they do need some protection here.
Well, one of our listeners, Mary, has messaged in to say, please tell Lord Sewell his piece was brilliant, and you can read that with your Times subscription. It's on today. That was Lord Sewell, the Conservative peer.